Welcome to Gun Talk Hunt. We are excited to bring you another special episode. In this episode, if you are thinking about going across state lines to hunt, this is kind of your episode. This is going to be a big deal. And we have some legislation going into or passing in Colorado that has to do with wolves and why wolves isn't so much a great thing for the state. And joining me today is Mia Anstine. Mia, how you doing?
I'm doing great, KJ. How are you?
I'm doing good. And I'm just going to tell you right now, Mia is the most positive, uplifting person that you'll ever meet. She is always willing to help, and she's been helping me for quite a few years go through draw applications.
Well, that's such a nice introduction. Thank you.
Well, it's true. You're the most positive person I know, and you're always a joy to hang out with. But today's episode is brought to you by Pyramid Air. If you are not familiar with Pyramid Air, shame on you. Air gun hunting is here, and it is an absolute blast, to say the least. So let's talk about the introduction of wolves and what you've been doing in Colorado. You've really been hitting the pavement hard on this one.
Yeah, I have actually worked with the Game Commission and gone to sportsmen's caucuses and so forth for several years. It's been a while that I've been very active, attending commission meetings and learning about Colorado Parks and Wildlife, what they do and why they do a lot of the things that they do. A lot of people get upset and think that some things are just hasty decisions where they don't see the background of how the organization comes to create maybe a draw process or a limitation to elk hunting licenses or something like that. I've actually been doing it for quite a while, and how I got started doing that was I live in Southwest Colorado near Durango, and I have been on the board of directors for our local Safari Club International chapter. And the president said, there's a Sportsman's Day at the Capitol, whatever date it was at that particular year. And if anybody wants to go, we're going to take a van up there. If we can get enough people. And I always just kind of thought, there's going to be people up there in Denver that represent me, so this is good. And for 2 years in a row, I had that thought, someone's up there. It's all good. It's 6 hours away from me. And the third year, I happened to have something to do with family up in Denver. And so I was like, oh, this is perfect. While I'm there, I'm going to go to the Sportsman's Day and meet and rub elbows with all these other sportsmen, because as you said, as a positive figure or positive person, I love interacting and getting to know other people and seeing like what they're doing and why and learning from them. Well, I show up at the Capitol, and there were 9 of us there on Sportsman's Day at the Capitol.
Oh.
And I say us because that includes me. There were 9 of us. And so that is not the type of representation I had envisioned. And from that day forward, I've decided I have to go and represent myself, because honestly, there were sportsmen there, but they were, trappers, outfitters, retired game outfitters and stuff like that. But nobody represented a woman who owned an outfitting business, who guided hunters, who taught aquatic nuisance species information and all of my background. So I was just like, I have to be there and represent. And ever since then, I just decided I had to become involved and had to learn. So that's how I got started. And this year, in 2020, during the elections, we had a ballot initiative, and it was Proposition 114 to introduce wolves into Colorado, and it passed. It passed by a 2% margin. And basically, the metro areas said that the rural areas need to have wolves. And we already have wolves in Colorado, but that's what they said. So it means more work.
and it's these urbanites that go out and they go, well, we want to hear wolf howls. We really want to hear a wolf howl when we're on the trail, and it would be so neat and it would be so enjoyable if we heard that. They do not understand the toll a wolf population produces on ungulates, on the deer population, the antelopes, the elk, the moose, all these ungulates. it's a problem. And dive into some of the problems, because that's something that the urbanites who make these decisions don't don't have a clue about.
Well, and it's something that's really unfortunate. We tried to get messaging out and explain that in Colorado, you're talking about the ungulates and the predation that happens. Something that is happening in our state right now there's a 7-year study. We're halfway through it right now. And the study is on elk because we have a severe decline in the elk population in the southern half of the state. And there's a curve that we look at in the biology of the high number to sustain the elk with the habitat that we have, and then the low number. And right now we are at the bottom of the low number. And so we've been doing these studies in Colorado. They've collared elk and they've done in vitro in the uterines of the cows to see when they're calving, to see the health of the calves and so forth. But the elk population is already declining before we have these wolves that are going to be introduced. And that's something that I think it'd be awesome to hear a wolf howl in the wild. But I also know that there's a balance. I mean, as somebody who believes in conservation and the North American model of wildlife conservation, I think there has to be a balance. And right now we're at the low end with our elk, and we don't need those to drop any further. And with that comes the hunting portion. And I'll just give you my opinion, part of why people want the wolves is to make hunters not a thing. And so if you have the wolves maintaining that population, you don't need a hunter. Whereas someone like me, I grew up, it's in my heritage and family traditions. We hunt for food. It's not that I can't afford to go to a grocery store, but there is that reward of being outdoors and doing the hard work to put food on the table for our family.
That's that's interesting. I honestly hadn't even thought that this was a kind of a push to ease hunters out. It's kind of
well, if you think about it, Colorado and Wyoming was supposed to be the center. However, the wolves kind of stayed up north. They have migrated down. As I said, we have wolves in Colorado. We have documented wolves in northern Colorado, and they're from Yellowstone. So they migrate. They migrate miles, hundreds, thousands of miles. And so if you put them in Colorado, they're going to go to Texas. They're going to go to Arizona. They're going to go to Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri. They're going to migrate. And it's just the way they spread. It is natural. And I do have a lot of friends who believe in preservation instead of conservation, and they think we should just leave wild animals alone. And if you are wanting to leave wild animals alone, then why would you want to introduce them when they're already migrating on their own?
It makes perfect sense. I mean, you kind of opened my eyes to a new way of thought process, and I appreciate that. But what wolves end up doing is why they are migrating, and a lot of people don't know this, why they're migrating is because they decimate a herd. Those populations reach record lows, like what Mia's dealing with, and then they move because they go where the food is. They're not, right. Hey, this is our territory. We're hanging out here. This is it. No, they're cleaning it out, and then they're moving on. So it's unfortunate. And you said they were wanting to introduce these very quickly, right?
Yeah, so you were talking about moose when you were talking about what the wolves prey on, and we have moose in Colorado. The Cyrus moose was introduced. I can't tell you the exact number of years ago, but there was a 15-year study before they actually put the moose in Colorado, because they wanted to know how they were going to impact the habitat for the animals that were already here. And wolves eat moose. So here we have this relatively new animal that we spent hundreds of hours and thousands of dollars introducing, and I should say millions of dollars introducing. And now we're going to introduce a predator that's potentially going to wipe them out. And if you look on Colorado Parks and Wildlife website and you go to apply for a moose, a lot of the units only allow you to take one moose, and it's a once in a lifetime hunt. It's not something you get to do every year. So you're looking at a very small number of success and number of moose taken because they're not a huge population yet. They are thriving, but it's not like they're big enough that you want to introduce an apex predator to take them down.
Well, and this goes into our very next topic. is, what does this mean for the guy crossing the line, the guy going out and trying to apply for those tags? The less moose there are, they're going to manage somewhere, and they are going to cut tags.
Right. Yeah. And the moose, like I said, right now, they're pretty limited. Elk, something we did just last year with the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission is I went and testified. As I said, I go to the commission meetings. I pay attention to them. Before COVID happened, so it was probably about a year ago, I went and testified at the commission meeting, and I'm an archery hunter. I love all means of take, but as an archery hunter, I went and I asked them to please limit archery tags in the southwest portion of Colorado because we have very few elk here. And that's what's going to happen is it's going to spread throughout the state. I see it potentially, and actually I'm on the sportspersons roundtable committee. And it's something that our Southwest Regional Manager said at our last meeting that potentially the tags will be limited throughout the state. Right now, Colorado still has areas where if you decided you wanted to come hunt here this fall, we can just show up and we can go to one of the local offices and we can get you a hunting license as long as you have your hunter education. Whereas right now, if you wanted to hunt archery in the Southwest region here, you're going to have to apply, and you'd have to do that during the application period.
Wow. And which is fixing to open up. But before we jump on to the application process and maybe some tips and tricks that you've got, give us an idea of how we as a group can help Colorado, especially now. How can we reach out and how can we make our voices be heard? Because if there are no animals in Colorado, we are not going to be going there to hunt.
Well, and here's something that some people don't think of. In Idaho, I believe it's 90% of the hunting outfitters that went out of business when the wolves came into Idaho. And so it's the livelihoods of people. I have a very good friend. She's actually the president of the Outfitters Association here in Colorado. And she's terrified because she and her husband, it's been their business for the past 25 years, is guiding hunters. And if they lose their business, they don't know what they're going to do. And they have young children and everything else. And so that's an aspect. If I know a lot of people want to do a do-it-yourself hunt, but the outfitters are the ones who clear the trails for you. The outfitters do maintenance. They have a lot of work that they do that you maybe don't even notice. But also, if we have economies that are going away, if hunters aren't able to come and hunt in an area, they're going to go to another state or somewhere else, and the local mom and pop businesses are going to close down. And so something that I've been encouraging people to do is, and always do it in a respectful manner, not out of anger, because if you think of somebody hollering at you or in your face yelling at you or calling you names, you're going to shut down and you're going to think they're a jerk and they don't deserve anything good. And so always out of respect, get in touch with legislators. If you live in Colorado, tell them that you are their constituent, because you do matter to them if you're their constituent. As somebody who's from out of state, you can still message Colorado legislators and let them know, I enjoy coming to Colorado for kayaking or rafting or hunting or maybe mountain biking, and let them know that this is going to have an impact on the store where you go to rent your mountain bike or the fly shop where you go to get your gear. Because if those places close down, you're not going to have that anymore. And the communities, quite honestly, some of the communities that have businesses that are gone due to COVID, you go there and it's not enjoyable because it's empty.
Yeah.
So if you can message legislators is one, but a bigger one is to message Colorado Parks and Wildlife, the Game Commission. And so if you go, the website is cpw.state.co.us. And you go to their About page and then to Commission. And on the Commission page, you can message either the chairman or just the commission as at large. And the chairman does share the messages with the rest of the commission. But you can message them and just express concerns. They are pretty they're pretty well versed in a lot of things as far as wolves kill elk. Like we all know that. So if you have something a little more deep than that, something personal, then let them know that. And as I said, please always do it out of respect. Try not to make the hunting community look like we're evil or something like that.
Yeah, it's that's a big thing to me too. Is I mean these guys are, we want them to have our best interests, and we can't do that putting an ugly face forward. So always, right. I agree, Mia, and take it from someone who is the nicest person I've ever met. Mia, be respectful, and just reach out.
I try. Sometimes it's hard,
but oh, I know, but even like just us reaching out, it allows them to know, okay, there's something bigger here. There's something bigger brewing that we need to look forward to. Because when they just hear local voices, it's hard to open up their minds.
Right. It is harder. And when they know that it has a larger impact than just not letting you hunt, if they know that it's people's livelihoods, it's going to affect people with families, that stuff, that they do understand that. They're people too.
Right.
You know, and a big thing that I've learned in developing relationships with legislators, with commission members, stuff like that, is it's just like the gun community. We're quiet and quiet and quiet, and then all this stuff is happening, and then we finally rear our heads when it's gone too far, and then we're pretty emotional and passionate. But if you just communicate and converse before it comes to the point where you're red-faced mad, it helps them know that you are a person. And
right.
Over the years, it's just hands down that the hunting community and the gun owner community, they aren't heard. And so one thing that I will say is, if you don't speak up and express that you don't agree with something, it's just as good as advocating for it. And that's the way they think of it. If nobody's objecting to it, so it must be okay.
Yep.
And so you have to object if you don't think it's okay. Or just like me going to the Capitol and thinking there's going to be 100 sportsmen there and there's none. You can't assume that they know what you think.
100%. This Gun Talk Hunt is brought to you by ATN. Now, you know ATN. You know I know ATN. But did you know they offer first responder and military discounts? Yeah, they do. All you got to do is call for details at 650-989-5100 and get into the night vision and thermal imaging game. Now, you're asking, well, what can I get? Well, you can get something like their Excite 4K Pro, which, if you're not aware, it's pretty phenomenal. Or you can get the ATN Thor 4, which is thermal imaging and one heck of an optic. It comes in a lot of different sizes, and it starts out, the starting price is $1,900, which that's not a lot if you think about it. Get yours today at atncorp.com. That's atncorp.com. Okay, so now on my thought process right now I'm switching gears, is it's application season. And if you guys don't know, application season means, like, for those road hunters, for those long haul guys that, you know, hey, we've got to go and we're hunting other states. Now's the time you need to be paying attention to what's happening around the states, and different draws are opening up for applications. So you're the expert. For me, you're the expert in Colorado, and that's fixing to open up. What are some tips and tricks for guys looking at Colorado saying, you know, man, I'd love to hunt that state before the wolves take over?
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was just going to tell you, is start applying now, because it's, as I said before, it may become limited eventually. But a big tip is to go online to the Colorado Parks and Wildlife website. And when you go on there, there are a lot of helpful links. There are pointers for the application process. The regulations brochure is a great place to start, but sometimes, if you have never looked at it before, it can look a little overwhelming. And so on their website, they have videos to help you go through that process and to help you understand what the codes mean and stuff like that. You can also go there and look up statistics. So you can see where the most mule deer bucks were taken. You can test that kind of stuff out. And that might help you decide if you want to go where everyone else is going, or maybe someone's not going somewhere because there just aren't a lot of deer or elk there. And you can research that way. You can also look at preference points is something for certain areas. They are limited draw areas. And so before you can draw, you're going to have to apply there for X number of years. It varies with these areas, but you'll have to apply there maybe 3 years and get 3 preference points before you get to apply the 4th year and be put into the lottery. And so there are explanations on their website about that.
And I think that's one of the coolest things about the website is that it does walk you through and it gives you all the statistics, which, I mean, a while back, I mean, guys were just taking, just common knowledge or information gathered from all these agencies to apply. And now you can do it all online, which is actually really nice. But what do you think one of the biggest misconceptions is when it comes to hunting out of state, especially in a big state like Colorado?
The biggest misconception? I'm not sure what the biggest misconception would be.
Oh, I stumped her.
I think a big misconception is that we have the most elk, the biggest elk, and that sort of thing. And something that I have noticed when I've guided is that maybe people watch too much TV, but I've had people, oh, well, that's not a big elk. Well, it is for the area, maybe.
Right.
And that's something I've learned going whitetail hunting is, I see a whitetail and to me, well, gosh, that looks like a tiny deer, but it's big for the area. And so that's something that you have to learn is, maybe all you're going to get is a 4x4 in the area that you're looking for, or maybe you're going to get 6x6s, or maybe if you go to one of those limited draw units, you're going to get a 350 bull.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I think is a misconception that I've seen with hunters who haven't really done research is I think sometimes they automatically assume that you're going to get those big, giant, massive, symmetrical, perfect bulls. And that doesn't always happen.
Well, we live in a day where everything we see on YouTube is success. Everything we see on the Instagrams is success. And we're looking at all these because I've been binge watching elk videos and application process tips and tricks videos forever. And that's all you see is success. You don't see and hear the amount of people that go out there and they don't draw or they aren't successful. Like those are the stories that I kind of want to hear. I want to know like what happened, was it the unit, or just, did you just have bad luck? Like we don't hear those stories. Like those stories are rarely told.
Something else I think that's a misconception is that you're going to get one on the first day. And especially if you're archery hunting, I had somebody so I also have my own podcast. It's called the Mac Outdoors Podcast with Mia Anstine. And a lady messaged me and she said she wants to feed her family and wanted to know the best way to get a bow so she could start archery hunting. And I'll be honest, she didn't live in Colorado. So maybe she lived somewhere where they're coming through her backyard. I don't know. But in Colorado, an average time with your bow to harvest an elk is 10 days. The average guided hunt is 5 days. So for you to become successful, your guide's going to have some things pulled out of their butts to make this happen. And quite honestly, the guides, they have an advantage because they do know the areas. They know what the elk are doing, where they bed, and, they're not going to hunt them in their beds when they're laying down and stuff like that. But that's something that I think is another misconception is that, okay, I'm going to go and hunt the last 3 days of season and I'm going to be successful. And some people are, but it's the likelihood isn't there.
We all know those lucky people. I mean, we know that, sometimes they just fall into it. But in large part, if it's me, I'm probably going to be pulling the trigger on that 10th day, if not any day, because it's just it's work. And I think a lot of people think that, I'm going to go out, I'm going to blow the call a couple times, they're going to come in, I'm going to shoot them at 25 yards, and they're done, and that's it, and that's all I got to do. But it's work. You've got to think about gear, and that's another thing, gear, like what you need to do a true like backpack, backcountry adventure hunt, like what people expect to get. That gear list is intense.
Yeah, and I have a gear list on my website for those backcountry hunts that I can share with you. I can send you a link to that. But gear is super important because part of hunting up in the high country, actually, and out in the desert areas, out in the plains and the grasslands and stuff, even if you're hunting out there, you need basic survival gear. And Colorado is amazing during archery season. And I'm speaking about archery season basically because I'm looking at my daughter's archery bull in front of me in my office. Because in archery season, it's in September and you think that's warm time, but it can snow in September. One year when I was archery hunting, I woke up to some snow on the ground and it was the middle of September. Man. So you definitely have to be prepared for that stuff. We found abandoned camps where people, from out of state came with their low country horses that hadn't been acclimated, and then a foot of snow dumps and they just leave. They just get out of there because it's scary. If you haven't experienced it and you're not prepared, it can be scary.
Well, if you got to be prepared. And I think you and I both agree that, like, if you're not paying attention and if you're not in contact with someone within the area, call the game warden, do something before you go, to get information, to get most recent data. That's going to help you a lot further than just showing up and going, well, I hope it works out.
Yeah. It's something that just popped in my mind as you say that. Last year, I was packing out an elk and for a friend, but we had passed a camp. It's empty, and this is during archery season again. But it's empty, and we're headed down to the truck, and then a lady meets us at the trailhead, and she's in full panic mode that there's an abandoned camp up there, and she needs to call the authorities because somebody's missing. And that's something that it's a mutual respect in the outdoors. You don't go rifling through someone's camp, and you don't steal their stuff or whatever. Right. You don't destroy their camp. But also, they could be out day hunting and not come back till after dark because as hunters, that's what we do. But that's somewhere where we can educate a non-hunter and just explain that to them, that it's okay. And when we're out camping as hunters, we don't always stay on the trail. And this is something that some of my hiker friends when they want to come and tag along on a hunt. And if you can get someone to tag along with you, it's a great thing because their eyes are opened and their minds are kind of blown when they come on hunt and they're not a hunter.
Well, that's a great tip.
They're used to being forced on the trail as a hiker, whereas hunters, we don't want to be on the trail. We want to be off where the game is, out and
right.
off of the trail.
Yeah, so, they don't put up deer crossing signs and expect the deer to cross.
Right. So if you can that's a suggestion for me, is if you can get somebody that's a non-hunter and just kind of give them a little exposure to the fun that we have and how different the world looks through a hunter's eyes than through maybe a birder's eyes, because it's completely different.
Oh, absolutely. Well, Mia, we are nearing the end of our podcast, and I can't thank you enough for coming on and being a positive role model for everyone out there. And if you haven't, MiaAnstine.com, that's MiaAnstine.com, and sign up for her newsletter. She has some great stuff. She's got great recipes. You got a little bit of everything there. Talk about
everyone tells me I need to hone it in.
Really? No, I don't think so. I think where you're at is great.
Feel like it all goes together. In my opinion, it all goes together. And I mean, hunting, fishing, shooting, and outdoors is kind of where I try to keep the focus, but I also have cattle. I have agriculture. I like to go fishing at the lake or go water skiing or whatever.
Yeah.
But it all goes together. It's basically outdoor recreation. And I have to specify hunting because when I'm out, even if I'm on a summertime hike, I'm still scouting.
Absolutely. Who isn't? Who isn't?
If I go float fishing in the raft down the river, I'm still scouting.
Yep. That's funny because I find myself doing the exact same thing. Well, Mia, thank you so much. And everybody, thank you for listening to Gun Talk Hunt. Be safe, be prepared, and always be adventurous.